There are moments in football when the noise from the stands does not come only from singing, but from a feeling that is hard to explain. A mix of frustration, expectation, and uncomfortable silence begins to take over, even when the club remains alive in important competitions. At St. James Park, this atmosphere has subtly returned, almost imperceptible to those who look only at results and league tables, but very clear to anyone who follows Newcastle United's day-to-day closely, sensing that something is building behind the scenes. When a season enters this kind of phase, every detail starts to carry double weight. A more serious look in a press conference, a short answer, a restrained gesture on the touchline. Everything begins to be interpreted differently. It is in this scenario that supporters start asking not only about wins or defeats, but about stability, confidence, and the future. And that is exactly why following these stories through to the end matters. So take the chance to subscribe to the channel and not miss any important updates about Newcastle. What makes this moment even more intriguing is the contrast between what is seen on the pitch and what happens away from the cameras. Newcastle is still competing in major tournaments, still representing the club on relevant stages, but recent results have started to create a noise that goes beyond the scoreline. There is a growing sense that the atmosphere is heavier, and this is often the first sign of internal changes, even when nothing is officially announced. In recent matches, every game seems to carry more than just 3 points. There is a silent pressure that grows with every mistake and every missed chance. For the more attentive supporter, it is clear that this phase cannot be reduced to cold numbers or isolated statistics. Something deeper is happening, something involving confidence, demands, and the relationship between the team, the coaching staff, and the stands. And it is right here that the story begins to take on more delicate contours. According to journalist Luke Edwards, Newcastle United have no intention of sacking Eddie Howe, and the board continues to give the manager their full backing. However, there is a crucial point that changes everything: the possibility that Howe himself could choose to leave if he feels the supporters are turning against him. This information completely changes the reading of the current moment and helps explain the tense atmosphere that has been felt in recent weeks. This nuance is fundamental, because it is not about a cold decision from the board, nor an internal ultimatum. It is about the manager's personal stance, who, according to Edwards, does not wish to remain in an environment where he does not feel wanted or supported by the fans. It is a detail that goes unnoticed by many, but it reveals a great deal about Eddie Howe's profile and how he views his role at the club at this specific point in the season. The recent context helps explain why this subject has gained momentum. Newcastle have won only once in their last 8 matches, a run that naturally increases pressure. In addition, the early exit from the EFL Cup, with 2 defeats to Manchester City, deepened the feeling of frustration among supporters. Even with the team still alive in the Champions League and the FA Cup, the margin for error in the Premier League seems to be shrinking by the week. When results fail to meet expectations, the environment changes quickly. Supporters begin to question choices, strategies, and decisions, even while recognizing the work done previously. This is the point at which the relationship between the stands and the manager becomes sensitive. That is why, if you enjoy following in-depth analysis and behind-the-scenes stories that do not always appear in the traditional media, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to stay well informed about everything involving Newcastle. Luke Edwards also highlights an important emotional factor. After the match against Brentford, there were clear signs of dissatisfaction from the crowd, and this appears to have directly affected Eddie Howe. According to the journalist, the manager looked visibly downbeat, both in his posture and in the tone of his voice during the press conference. These signs, often ignored, tend to say more than long speeches or technical explanations. Howe's comments after that match reinforced this perception. He took full responsibility for the recent performances and showed a high level of internal pressure by saying he was angry with himself, frustrated, and blaming himself for the performances. The manager revealed a human, vulnerable side that does not always appear in moments of victory. This helps explain why the reaction of the crowd can weigh so heavily on his future decisions. This kind of statement does not come out of nowhere. It is usually the result of sleepless nights, repeated analysis, and constant pressure for quick answers. At clubs like Newcastle, where expectations have risen sharply in recent seasons, any negative run takes on greater proportions. And for a manager who is highly self-demanding, this scenario can become emotionally draining in a short space of time. Even with the board's support assured, the central issue becomes the environment. Howe, according to Edwards, would not stay somewhere he feels is no longer welcoming. This stance explains why the possibility of a voluntary departure is considered real, even if not imminent. It is a delicate situation, driven far more by the relationship with the supporters than by internal meetings or administrative evaluations. The next matches therefore take on enormous significance, not only because of their impact on the table, but because of their direct effect on the atmosphere between manager and fans. Each result can either reinforce confidence or deepen tension. For those who follow Newcastle week in, week out, it is clear that these games go beyond the football itself and could shape key directions for the rest of the season. Among these fixtures, the trip to face Tottenham stands out. A negative result away from home, against a pressured opponent would likely heighten concerns among supporters even further. In moments like this, the reaction of the stands is scrutinized closely because it can directly influence Howe's perception of his own future at the club. It is worth remembering that Newcastle are still alive in important competitions, which makes the situation even more complex. This is not a team without objectives or lost in the season. On the contrary, there are still possible paths forward, but the emotional cost of this phase can be high. It is precisely this combination of hope and frustration that makes the situation so unpredictable and worthy of full attention from supporters. In this kind of context, the silence from the board also speaks volumes. The public maintenance of support for Eddie Howe signals institutional stability, but it does not eliminate external noise. Often, the most impactful decisions are not announced in press conferences, but mature gradually, influenced by atmosphere, results, and public perception, and that is what makes this moment so decisive. For supporters, understanding these behind-the-scenes dynamics helps avoid rushed conclusions. Not every crisis ends in a sacking, and not every poor run means an immediate rupture. However, when the manager himself admits mistakes and shows emotional wear, the situation deserves closer attention. That is why following complete analyses like this makes a difference throughout the season.